I have been obsessed with Keyboard Maestro for the last half decade, and today I'm going to show you how it saves me so much time it feels illegal. First, I'll show you a tedious task that used to waste a bunch of my time, and then I'll show you the new, faster method of doing it with Keyboard Maestro, and then I'll show you how I actually set up the faster way. So here's what the task looks like. So I like to collect vocabulary words that I don't know. So if I'm reading books or articles online, then I'll copy the words I don't know and put them into this vocabulary list in my Notes app. So every time there's a new word, I'll just add it to the end on its own line like this. And then the way that I like to remember these words is that I put them into Anki. So Anki is just a flashcard app. And by the way, if you don't use Anki or any of the apps I show in this video, that's fine, because I'm going to tell you the general techniques that you can apply to the apps that you use in your own workflow. But this is what Anki looks like. So if I press this add button up here, then I can add a vocabulary word. So I'll copy the first word from this list and I'll come back to Anki and paste it in. And then I need to find the definition. So I need to open the dictionary and look it up, and then copy the definition here and paste it into the definition field. Then I also like to have an example sentence so that I can remember the word in context a bit better. So then I'll copy the example, which is just this italic part here. Then I'll paste that into the example field in Anki. All right, now I have the word and I can press the add button down here to add it to Anki. And then I just have to repeat this process for every single word in my list. So I'll come to Anki, paste in the term, then open the dictionary and paste it in there, and then copy the definition, paste it in here, and then sometimes there are even multiple example sentences. So I just want the first one if there are multiple. So I'll copy the first one and paste that here. And also, normally it pastes with all the formatting. So if I had one like this where there's italics, there's bold text, and I paste it in, then I want to get rid of that formatting. So I'd have to come up here, I'd press the italics, and I'd press the bold buttons to get rid of the bolds. And it looks like it didn't even work. Let's try that again. I guess I have to select that bold text by itself. So, or paste it without formatting. So yeah, there's really weird stuff that goes on, and it takes a while to get these flashcards correct. But then I can add it, and in Anki, I can see all the cards that I've added here. So just to preview what they look like, here's the first word we did, the front and the back, and it's great. It works great for remembering these words, but it's just kind of a tedious, painful process to get them into Anki in the first place. So that is the slow version. But now let me show you the much faster version that I set up using Keyboard Maestro. So I'm going to delete the ones I just added so that we're starting from a blank slate. And now I'm going to press a keyboard shortcut, and I'm doing nothing on the keyboard, but it opens up the dictionary and it pasted the first word in. And now it's waiting for me to press enter. So I just have to bring my mouse to the definition that I want, and then I press return or enter on the keyboard. And when I do that, it highlights that definition and it copies it and it pastes it straight into the flashcard app. So now we're in the second one. I'll press enter for this definition because that's the one I want. And then maybe for this word, I want to copy the second definition. So I'll press enter over that, and it instantly copies and pastes the definition and example sentences into the right field. So I'm going to cancel this macro, this automation, and show you what those cards looked like. So let's discard this field, and then let's come check what those look like. So you can see here, it pasted in the definition, it pasted in the example, and it also got rid of all that weird formatting like the bold and italics. So now when I preview it and go to the back, it will display the word or the definition correctly. So I have like some formatting features myself that will make the example sentence italics. So that's why I want to get rid of that formatting when I paste it in here. So this macro is great because you can imagine, over the years, I've added thousands of these vocab words to the flashcard app, and to do that process manually would be extremely slow. But with this macro that I just showed you, it is much faster, and I can add these words in a matter of seconds, whereas before it would have taken me, probably several minutes to get through a big list like this. All right, so now let's talk about how you would actually go about building a macro to do something like this. How do you actually set up an automation to do these complex tasks of, opening the dictionary, waiting for you to press a button to select the right word and definition, switching between the different apps, getting rid of the formatting. We're going to cover all of that in this video. And basically what I'm going to do is come to Keyboard Maestro and build this macro from scratch. So obviously I've made it before, so this is not my first time doing it, but I'm going to walk through the process as if I'd never made it before and show you my thought process and how I go about performing all of these steps. So I'm going to make a new macro by coming down here and title it add vocab to Anki, and I'll add a hotkey trigger to it. So this will enable me to activate the actions that I'll add below shortly. It will let me activate those actions with a keyboard shortcut. So for now, I'm just going to do Command Option Control S, which I like to use to test my macros when I'm running them. Maybe I'll change this later. And then below, we can start adding actions. So the first thing, I just changed that shortcut, but the first thing we need to do is copy the words in our list, because we need to be able to go through them one at a time and access each one to be able to paste into a new flashcard app. So let me delete these again and come back to this add window. So the first thing we want to do is get the first word into this field here. Now in Keyboard Maestro, I know there is a way to read the contents of a file. So let me open up a Chrome window and I'll search Keyboard Maestro how to read a file. And I actually have a macro to type Keyboard Maestro quickly since I'm always looking stuff up for it. But I'm going to search this Keyboard Maestro read a file, and I'm going to come to the Keyboard Maestro wiki, and it says that there is an action called read a file that allows you to take the contents of a text or image file and put them into the clipboard or variable. So that sounds like what I want to do. So I'm going to search the read a file action. So I'll press enter to insert that. And by the way, you can press Command Control A on the keyboard if you want to be able to add an action by name. So that will bring up the search window, and I just searched read a file and press enter. So then here, the file that I want to read is the one here, the vocab list in my Notes app. So I'm going to press this purple folder and try to find that file. So I know it's somewhere in this folder here. I have my Obsidian Vault, and I'll select the vocab list and press open to insert that. So then now this has this file path here, and it says it's saving it to the system clipboard. So the system clipboard is like the thing that you would paste if you were to just press Command V. But in this case, I'm going to change it to a variable. So variables in Keyboard Maestro are just a way that you can store some text information. So basically this is saying, read the contents of this vocab list nodes and save them to this variable in Keyboard Maestro. And I'm going to rename it to maybe local vocab list. But you could call this whatever you want. I have an entire tutorial about variables, which goes way more in depth, like why you would start it with the word local versus not. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as local vocab list. And then if we want to preview what the contents of that variable are, an easy way to do that would be to add the display text action, and we can change it to display text in a window. And then here, the way that you show what is inside of a variable if you're in a text field is by adding the percent variable percent before that variable name, and then adding a closing percent at the end. So I also have a macro to quickly insert that, which lets me paste in the variable with the appropriate formatting very easily. So now we have our vocab in this variable, and let's test the macro. So I'm going to press run up here, or I could have pressed my keyboard shortcut, and you can see it displays all of our vocab in this note. So let's check. Maybe I'll add a couple blank lines to see if it's reading them correctly. And let's come back to Keyboard Maestro. I'll press the shortcut. And you can see any changes that I make to this note are reflected in the variable that we just captured here. So this looks like it's working great. And by the way, if you want me to personally make you custom macros like this to save you a lot of time in your workflow, you can sign up for a free coaching call with me using the top link in the description. Now we can think about the next step. So we have our vocab list inside Keyboard Maestro now, and I'll disable this action so it's not going to display that vocab list every single time we run the macro. But now we need to think about how we get each individual item from this list, because we don't want it to copy and paste the entire list into this field right here. We just want it to paste one at a time. So the next step I'm going to do is add what's called the for each action. So for each, I'm going to press enter to add this. And what the for each action does is it lets you go through each of the items in some list. So the list is what you pick here. So this is where you actually select which list you want to use. And in this case, the list we want is found in a variable. So I'm going to come down here to the one that says lines in collection and press that. So this is the one that you would press if you want to go through each of the lines in a variable, and we change it from system clipboard to variable here. So I know this is a little confusing, but it will make sense in a second. So we're basically saying we're going to go through each item in this variable, which, as we saw before, the variable is just the items in our vocab list. And then now up here it says for each, and then we have to enter the name of a variable. So for each, I'm just going to call it local word in the lines in our vocab list. Then we will perform the actions below. So this can be a bit tough to understand at first, but we're basically saying that we're going to capture each individual word from whatever lines appear in this variable. So if I were to drag and drop this display text in a window action in here, and instead of displaying the local vocab list every time, I'll display the local word, so the word from the vocab list, and then I were to run this, then you'll see it displays a bunch of text windows, each one having its own vocab word in it. Now, by the way, it can be kind of annoying to close all these at once. So if you hold the Option button and press X, it will close them all simultaneously. But essentially what this action is doing is it's pulling out each individual line into this new variable called local word. And then we can use that local word to perform some actions within here. So it will do the actions in this section here, and then it will come back to the top and get the next word in the list, and then do the actions in here again, and repeat that process until there are no more words or no more lines of text in this variable. So this is a great start. We now have each word separated onto its own line that we can perform some actions on. So for each of the words in the list, the next step was to open Anki and paste it in here. So let's go back to Keyboard Maestro, and I'll add the activate application since we're trying to open Anki. So let's activate Anki. And then the next thing we needed to do was paste. So I'll add the insert text by pasting action, and the text that we want to paste is the word. So then I'm going to use the variable local word as the thing that we will paste in this text box here. So let's think about what this is doing so far. It's capturing each word, it's opening Anki, and it's pasting in the word into this field here. Okay, so after we have it paste the word, whatever that word may be, then we needed to open the dictionary and have it paste the word in there. So let's add another action to activate a specific application. I'm going to hold the Option button to click and drag, duplicating this action from above, and instead of activating Anki, we want it to activate the dictionary. And then we want it to paste the local word in there. So let's test this macro so far And maybe we can add an action to cancel this macro at the very end. So cancel this macro after one iteration of going through. So basically what this is saying is that instead of trying to run all 4 of these actions for every single word in the vocab list, just run it for the first word, and then once it runs it for the first word, then cancel this macro so it doesn't have a chance to try running these actions over and over for every single word. So we'll remove this later, but just to test the actions for now, let's leave it in and press run. So I'll press run. And actually, before I do that, let me get rid of this here so that we have a clean window to add it in, and then I'll come back, press run. Okay, perfect. So this is exactly what we want. It opened Anki, it pasted in the word, and then it opened dictionary and pasted the word in there. So maybe I'll try changing the first word. Maybe I'll move one of these words up instead so it's a different word, so we can test whether it will work correctly if the word is different. So let me delete that and come back to Keyboard Maestro and run it. And perfect, it works as well with a different word. So this is exactly what we want. Now let me get rid of these again and come back to Keyboard Maestro and think about what the next step is. So by the way, I'll make the completed version of this macro available for you to download in the description if you want to play around with it yourself. But the next step we said was to wait for the dictionary to open and then wait for me to basically pick which definition I want. So let's think about how to do this. One way we can do this is by adding the pause until action. So pause until, I'll add that in, and the condition we want is a key condition. So what this action will do is it will pause the macro until some key is down. So maybe return would be a good key to have pressed. So whenever the macro gets to the point where the dictionary is open, all the macro will do is just wait until the user presses return, and then we want it to select whatever word is under, or I guess whatever definition is under the cursor at that time. So I talked about how to select the word or the paragraph under the cursor in my video about controlling the mouse. But to reiterate, basically what we need to do is we need to add a click or move mouse action, and we will click the left mouse button. Instead of a regular click, we'll do a triple click the left mouse button at the current mouse location. So we are triple clicking, and doing a triple click will highlight the paragraph under the cursor. So what these two actions are saying is wait until someone presses return, and then triple click whenever they press return under the cursor. So let's say we press return here, the macro should triple click, and then the next step that we want it to do is copy this paragraph. So let's add an action to copy like this, so then it will copy that text. And let's test the macro at this point again. So you're noticing that I'm not building the entire macro before testing it. It's more of build, test, build, test, build, test. And we're gradually expanding the actions and building it up, as opposed to building the whole thing and then trying to test it at the very end. So let me run the macro now. And it pasted it in twice because we didn't delete it from before. But now whenever I press enter, it should triple click and copy the paragraph under the cursor. So I just pressed return, and let me come paste. And you can see it did in fact copy the text that was under the cursor. So that's good. The macro is working up to this point. Let's come back. I'm going to delete this, and let's think about what to do next. So we have the dictionary open, we have Anki open, we just copy this text, and now we want it to paste the definition into this field, and we want it to paste the example into this field here. So first, let's think about having it paste in the definition. This could get a little bit tricky since we're copying it all at once. Like if it were two different paragraphs, one with the definition and one with the example, that would simplify things a bit. But since they're in the same paragraph and we copied this entire thing, that will make things a little bit harder since we'll have to split up that paragraph into two parts. So the best way to do this is probably to use a regular expression. So I have an entire tutorial about regular expressions, but basically they're patterns that let us find certain bits of text and then perform actions on those texts. So I'm coming to this website called regexer.com, which lets you preview what regular expressions will look like. And I'm going to paste in this paragraph that we just copied. Now, if we search for a regular term like a space, you'll see all the spaces appear. Or if we search for a word like the, it will find those matches in the text below. But in this case, I think it would make sense to try to search for a colon and then a space. So I'm searching colon space, and then we want to be able to split all the text before that into one part, and then all the text after that into another. So back in Keyboard Maestro, let's search for the search, and it will be this one here, search using regular expression action. So I'll press enter to add that. And we will search the system clipboard since we just copied the text in the action before. We'll search the system clipboard using a regular expression. And here's where we can think about splitting up the text into different parts. So in my regular expression tutorial, I talked about capture groups, which are basically a way of capturing part of the text into a variable. So in this case, what you need to do is make parentheses, and then inside it will search for whatever pattern you specify. So the dot pattern, as I talked about in that other tutorial, will match any character, and the plus pattern will match one or more of whatever comes before it. So this is basically saying search for one or more of any characters, and then search for a colon and then a space. So you can see this entire thing is being matched here. And then if we go to the details tab, you can see that group 1, which is the pattern inside the parentheses, is this part here. It's matching the pleasing and fortunate, but is not matching anything after that. Now we need to make another group to capture the rest of it. So everything after the colon and space. So let's add another dot plus, which again will search for one or more characters. And then down here we see in group 2, it has the second part, which is the example sentence. So the first part is pleasing and fortunate. The second part is the example sentence. The view was the room's only felicitous feature. And maybe one other change we can make is to get rid of this bullet point at the beginning. So it looks like in the dictionary that not every definition will have that bullet point. Like some up here will just start from the first word, while some, like this one, if they are sub-definitions, they will have this bullet point. So maybe we can think about adding another action in Keyboard Maestro to get rid of that. But for now, let's copy this pattern that we just made and bring it back to Keyboard Maestro. And so you can see, because we have two sets of parentheses, two capture groups here, it opened up two new spots for us to save those capture groups to variables. So the first capture group we said, this one here, group 1, is the definition. So we can call this local definition. And then the second one we said was the example. So local example. And maybe before we proceed, we can test whether this will work with some other words. So I'm going to copy this definition right here and paste it in. And it looks like it is splitting them up correctly into group 1 and group 2. Maybe let's try with another word. Let's go back to the dictionary, paste this one in. So let's see, maybe this one right here, we'll try this. And it looks like it's working. So cause an action to begin, that is the definition, and then the example sentence is below. So the other thing we had said we wanted to do was get rid of this bullet point if it appears at the beginning. So then maybe we can add an action to search and replace this time. So we want to search the variable, the definition. So that would be group 1 here, the group 1, which we saved to this variable local definition. And we want to search it for that bullet point followed by a space. So I'll paste that in here. And we want to replace it with nothing back to the source. So we replace it back to itself. So essentially what these two actions are doing, after we copy the definition like this, what it's doing is it's splitting that definition and example up into the component parts, and it's getting rid of all the other text. So this is now stored in the variable local def, and this is now stored in the variable local example. So this is exactly what we want, and this is making progress on our goal of pasting in the definition and example separately. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is open Anki back up after we've copied those definitions. So we copied this, we have the definition and example in different variables. After we do that, we need to go back to Anki, and let's actually run the macro at some point and see what the situation is once those actions have completed. So we have the word open here, and we have the definition, which we've copied here, and then we need to go back to Anki, and after that we can press tab to go down and paste in the definition, and then tab again to go down and paste the example. So first let's copy the action to activate Anki at this point. Also, I'm going to change the color of this action behind to maybe yellow so that we can differentiate it from the gray actions inside. Sometimes when all your actions are the same color and they're nested like this, it can be a bit difficult to distinguish them. So I'm going to change that color. But now we activate Anki, and then I said we need to press type a keystroke of tab, and then we need to paste in the definition. So what is stored in the local definition variable, so insert text by typing, and we could actually change it to insert text by pasting, and then I'll have it insert the local definition. So that should insert it here, and then we need to press tab to go to the next one and then paste in the example. So I'll copy these and paste in, instead of local def, local example. So let's test the macro and see what it does. So I'm going to come back, run it, and now it's waiting for me to press enter. I'll press enter here, and perfect. It pastes in the definition and it pastes in the example. And it also successfully got rid of that bullet point at the beginning of the definition. Now all that's left to do is press add. So I know that there's a keyboard shortcut in Anki of Command Enter to add a note, so we don't even need to press this button down here. We can just add a keyboard shortcut, type a keystroke of Command Return. All right, so maybe I'll switch these vocab words around so we have a new one at the front, and let's test it to make sure it's not just a fluke and it's working for multiple versions. So maybe I'll select this one here, and it looks like it worked for that one as well. And it brings us exactly back to the start where we're ready to paste in the next word. So now let me come back to Keyboard Maestro, and I'll disable this action here to cancel this macro. So what this will do is it will let all of these actions run for each of the words in the vocab list now, and not just the first one. So maybe we can delete the words from Anki that we just added so we don't have duplicates. Let me delete those, and then let's come back to the add window, and now let's run the macro. I'll press the keyboard shortcut this time, and let's press enter on this one. Perfect, it pastes in that definition. Let's try this definition. It pastes that in. Now, okay, so this is an interesting case. I had said at the beginning that if there are multiple example sentences in the definition, then I only want it to do the first one. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to cancel the macro that's running right now with a keyboard shortcut. And let's take a look at this word here, luminous, which was just added. So let's go back to the dictionary. I have a macro to look up the current word that's highlighted in the dictionary. So that's what I did there. Press the shortcut and it opens it in the dictionary. But here we have a definition with a lot of extra stuff in it. So let's bring this over to Regex so we can see what it looks like. And what it's doing is capturing the definition correctly into group 1, but then group 2 is capturing all of the examples instead of just the first one. So in Keyboard Maestro, we're going to have to make some changes to these actions here that split those up into different groups. Now, it's times like these where if you aren't so experienced with regular expressions, it can be difficult to come up with a complex expression like this that will capture this into group 1 and only the first example into group 2. So it's times like these when you might want to go to ChatGPT, and then here what I'm going to do is paste this in and say something like, come up with a regular expression to capture the part before the colon space into one group and capture the first example from what follows into another group. So maybe I'll tell it, in this case, group 1 would be this, and I'll copy what group 1 should be, which will be this first part here, the definition, paste that up here, and then I'll say group 2 would be, and then I'll copy this part here, so the first example, and paste that up here and press enter, and let's see what it comes up with. So it came up with this pretty complex expression. Let's see what that does back in regexer. Details, and it looks like it's not working. Maybe we can get rid of some of these, or even what we can do is just copy what we have and say, modify this. So I'm going to say, that didn't work. Try modifying this one. And I'll paste in the one we had before. So let's see what it says. It is modifying it with this, and let's try that, see what that does. So that created this one, and if I click on it, it looks like it succeeded. And maybe actually the previous one would have worked. I just did not click on the right spot in regexer. Oop, let's try that again. Let me copy this, bring it back. And okay, so it looks like the first one there actually would have worked. I just pressed the wrong thing in regexer. But either way, I think the second one is a bit simpler, which I like the look of. Simpler is usually better if they perform the same output. So let's copy that and bring it back to Keyboard Maestro and paste it in here. And let's see what the macro does now. So I'm going to bring that word luminous to the top, since that was the word that had these multiple examples, and let's delete it from Anki so we don't have duplicates. Actually, I'll delete all of these, and now let's try to add it. So I'll run the macro, I'll press the keyboard shortcut, it adds luminous, I'll press enter here, and it looks like it successfully added that word. So if we come to the vocab list and preview it, you can see it placed only the first example sentence into the field. Okay, now let's test this macro and see if it works in what you would call edge cases. So edge cases are things which are not the typical input, but they can still occur. So an example of an edge case would be that if we tried adding a word to Anki that is already in it, meaning that there's a duplicate. So normally in Anki, when you press add and you type in a term and there is a duplicate, this field will turn red and it will say show duplicates here. So if there's a duplicate term, if we already have the definition and example in Anki, let's think of a way to skip that term. So back in our macro, that would be somewhere after this. So we first paste in the word into this field, and then we open the dictionary, and then we wait for the user to grab the correct definition. But we should know at this point already whether that word is a duplicate or not. So let's add a condition there to check whether the word is a duplicate. So I'm going to come back here and I'll press if. I'm going to search for if, the if then else action. And the condition that I'm going to add is the found image condition. So found image condition, it's this one here. And what this will do is it will check if there's a certain image on the screen. So the image we're looking for is something like this red text and this little box here that says show duplicate. So let me take a screenshot of that with Command Control Shift 4. I'll just grab this box like this and paste that into the action with Command V. And if I press the space bar, we can see that image previewed here. So we're saying if the screen contains this show duplicate image, then we should do something else instead of the actions below. So let's think about what we want to do. So if the word is a duplicate, then probably we would want to just delete it and continue with the next word. So we can press Command backspace if that word is a duplicate. So let's add a keystroke action to press Command backspace, and let's move it up inside of the if statement. So we're saying if the word is a duplicate, if this image does appear on screen, then we want to delete that word. Otherwise, we should perform the normal set of actions. So I'm going to drag and drop all of those actions into the second part that says otherwise execute these actions. Now I'm also going to change the color of this, so again we can more easily distinguish between the different levels of this macro. But let's test this out and see what it does. So I'll press the shortcut once we're here, luminous. It says show duplicates, but then it still continued with opening the dictionary. So it seemed like something failed there. And I'll cancel the macro so we can try to figure out what that is. So if I type this by itself and then I enter a word that I know is a duplicate, it looks like there's a slight delay. It takes maybe a second or half a second for it to update and actually display that this word is a duplicate. So maybe all we need is a slight pause before that action. So I'll add a pause of 0.5 seconds. Let's try half a second and see if that works. So I'm going to delete that and press the hotkey to run the macro. And if you notice there, it skipped that word. It pressed Command backspace to delete it and immediately proceeded with the next word in the list. Now let's test a few of these examples and see if there's anything else we notice that goes wrong. So I'm just going to select a few of these definitions and examples and run through that entire list that we have in our flashcard app. So maybe I'll select this, and it looks like something went wrong there. So if we cancel the macro and go back to that flashcard, let's see which one that was. It looks like it was this one, the word efface. In the definition, it had a random number at the beginning. So let's open up the definition of this word. And it looks like here on some of the words, the definitions have a number to indicate whether it's the first or second definition. So again, I think in this case, we should update our regular expression to account for that. So maybe let's open the dictionary and copy this into ChatGPT and say something like this. Sometimes there is a digit and space at the beginning. Do not capture that as part of group 1. And let's see what it comes up with. Okay, let's try copying pasting this into regexer and let me grab that definition from the dictionary. So let's copy this whole thing and paste it into here. And if we click on it, all right, that seems to have fixed the problem. So it's capturing only the first part without the number at the beginning, and it's only capturing the first example sentence like before. So let's copy and paste this into Keyboard Maestro where we have our regular expression. And now let's try running the macro. So I think that was the word efface. So let's maybe delete these for now and run it starting at that word. So I'll come back to Anki, I'll delete it from here, and let's try it again. So I'm going to run the macro, and let's see what it does. I'll copy this one, and that time it looked like it worked. So if we go to the definition, then it pasted in the definition with no number at the beginning. All right, now let's think about whether there could be any more edge cases. So right now, the way we have this set up is that it's assuming that this add window will be at the front, but it's possible that another window is at the front when we run the macro. So I'm going to run the macro now. Let's run it, and it opens the definition and I'll press enter, but nothing's working. It's not able to paste in the words because the add window was not at the front when we started running the macro. So this is another edge case that we should think about how to address. We always want to make sure it's opening up this add window instead of just activating Anki by itself like it's doing right now. So it's activating Anki, but activating Anki could bring us to the wrong place. So back in Keyboard Maestro, let's make sure that the add window will always be the one brought to the front. So I'm going to search for the bring a window to front action and paste that in. So let's say bring to front in Anki, and we want to add, instead of the front window, we want to add the window with a certain title of add. So if we come up here, we can see that this window, the add window, is called add, whereas this one says example profile Anki. So we know that we want to add that word into this. And in fact, we can even disable this action to open Anki, since we're just going to bring that add window to the front anyway. So let's test this macro. I'm going to go to this window instead and run the macro. And that time it worked. So it brought the add window to the front, even though it was not at the front when we began running the macro. So let's test it and run through all of these. And let's also see what it does at the very end when it runs out of words. Okay, so at the very end, it just stops and does nothing, which is probably the behavior that we want. In fact, we could even have it press escape to close out of that add window. So let's add that in. At the very end, outside of everything else, once we've added all the words, we can just press the key escape. Now, one other change that I want to make to this macro is to display the add window in a certain configuration on screen. So sometimes the add window can look like this. Sometimes the dictionary will be small, or it will appear in a random place. So if this is the case, we don't want them to appear like this on top of each other, but we want them to appear on the left and right side of the screen. So let's add in some actions to make sure that takes place. So I'm going to delete that one from before. And let's say after we bring the add window to the front, we can move or resize. Let's see, move or resize. Maybe I'm spelling it wrong. Move, or here we go, resize a window. This is the action I'm looking for. So we want to, instead of resize, we want to move and resize that add window to the left column. So if we try this, we want it to do it with Anki, and let's run the macro and see what it does. It brings the add window to the front and it moves it to the left column. I'm going to cancel the macro and let's add a similar action down below. So I'll copy it and have that display after we open the dictionary. So in dictionary, move and resize that window to the right column. And now let me run the macro. Brings Anki to the front, and it brings the dictionary to the front on the left and right side. And it looks like something went wrong here. It didn't actually paste in the first word when it was supposed to. Now, maybe this was because I had clicked off of that field when I was resizing it before. So this is another consideration that we could keep in mind when we first run the macro. We should consider that maybe the add window isn't even open in the first place, or if it is, that the cursor is in the wrong place. So let's think about how we would fix that. So in Anki, let's check if there is a way to open that add window. So I'm going to search in the help. I'll search add, and it looks like there is not a way to add it directly. However, we do know that we can press the A button on the keyboard to open up the add window. So let's go back to the macro and think about how we could set that up at the very beginning. So now we're getting into part of the macro which would occur before we even start adding vocabulary words. We're just setting up the windows to make sure they're in the right place. So I'm going to add another if then else statement, and here we can check the any window condition. So we can say if there is any window in Anki that does not contain the word add, then we want to open that add window up. And like I said before, the way to open that up is to press the A button on the keyboard, whenever you are on the main screen. Now there are other screens like the browse window. If you press add or the A button here, it will not open up the add window. So we need to make sure that we are on this window here, the window that says example profile Anki. And we can see that if we're in another window, it doesn't say this dash Anki anywhere or hyphen Anki. So let's use that to determine where we should open the add window from. So let's use the same action we used before, the bring to front. Let's bring to front the window with title containing the hyphen Anki. So let's try this out and make sure that no add window is open. So far it's only this Anki window right here. And I'll come back to Keyboard Maestro and I want to test this. So I'm going to come down and press the try action. So if I press that, it does in fact open up the right window. And then from here, we know that we need to type a keystroke of A to add that window in. So now let's try this. I'm going to run this if statement by itself, and it opens up Anki and it presses A to open up this add window. But anyway, let's turn back to what we do in the scenario where the add window is at the front, but the cursor is in the wrong place, like maybe it's somewhere down here. So in a case like this, probably the best way to reset it would just be to close it and then add it back by pressing A. So if the add window does exist, then we should just press escape and then A. Or I guess we could press escape and then make sure we're on this window and then press A. So let's come back to Keyboard Maestro and we'll add those actions down here. So if the Anki window does contain the add window, then we'll just type a keystroke of escape. Let's see, escape. And then we'll make sure that we are back on this window and then we will press A again. I'm going to change this if statement to a different color. Cool. So what this will do is it will make sure, let's say we're on something like this, the add window is open, but the cursor is not in the right place. Let's see what it will do. Let's try it. And it looks like it didn't work because we need to bring this add window to the front before we try to escape it. So let's bring the window with title containing add to the front and then escape it. Let's try that and see what that does. Try, and it looks like that is still not working. So maybe we need a slight pause between these actions. Pause for let's say 0.2 seconds and see if that does the trick. So I'll try this big if statement and that is still not working. And actually I think that is just due to a problem with our logic here. We're saying if any window of Anki does not contain add, then do the first version. But even if the add window is open, I'm realizing there will be a window that contains this here. So it's always going to do this no matter what. So what we need to do in this case is just switch these two versions around. So I'm going to swap the order of these actions and change the condition to say if there is a window that contains add as opposed to does not contain add, then we'll open up the add window, close it out, and then reopen it. So let's try that, run it. And this time it looks like it worked. It closed it out and it selected the first term because that's what is selected by default when you press A. Now, if we look at this if statement here, you'll notice that the last two actions are actually the same for both parts of it. So the if and the then both have these two actions which are identical. Now, when you have a case like this in an if statement, you can actually just pull one of those outside of the if statement and get rid of the other so that you don't have duplicates. So we're saying we're only going to do these actions, basically bring the add window to the front and then escaping it if the add window is already open. And then after that, we'll bring that add window back open to the right place by pressing the A button when we come back to this window. But we're going to do that regardless. If the add window is not open, then we will come to this window and press A. So it doesn't matter. In either case, we're going to need to run these two actions. So we don't even need those inside the if statement in the first place. All right, so we added a bunch of actions here. Let's test them out to make sure they're working. So we have Anki open. We have our vocab list with a few words. And let's run the macro and see if it works. So it did bring the add window to the front, but it looks like it didn't paste in the word correctly. This might be another issue with pauses. So let's see right here, after we resize it, let's make sure we add a slight pause in there to give it enough time in case it needs a little bit of time to register that that window has now been opened and changed size. So let's run the macro again. I'm going to press the keyboard shortcut to run it. And this time it's working. So if I select a vocab word, the definition on the right, it is pasting those in correctly and doing its work like it's supposed to. And then at the end, it presses escape to close out that add window. Now, I'm sure there are a million other changes we could make to this macro to improve it, to think of more edge cases that we can take care of. You know, for example, if Anki is not even open at the very beginning, when we run the macro, maybe we would want an action to activate Anki at the very start. So there's a million different things that we could think of depending on our use case. But for now, I think this demonstrates a good bit of the thought process that goes into making a more complex macro like this. We looked at regular expressions, we looked at finding and replacing text, we looked at resizing windows, we looked at bringing certain windows with certain titles to the front. So hopefully this has been a helpful foray into the powerful things that you can do with Keyboard Maestro to save you a lot of time. And again, if this is the type of thing that you would want me to personally do for you, I have a coaching program where I will save you 100 hours a year, guaranteed, or you pay nothing. So if you're interested, you can sign up for the free call in the description. But if you enjoyed this video, you might like this one as well. Thanks for watching.